Okay, so in this video we're going to be talking about how to change the subject. Okay, so changing the subject just means that we need to rearrange different expressions so that we have a particular letter as the main subject. So for example, at the moment with A, we've got y as the subject at the moment because it's y equals. Okay, so we're going to have to rearrange it because all these questions we want to make x the equals. Just to clarify, I'm only doing the basic ones, so I won't be doing the ones where, for example, x appears on both sides. Okay, so this is just this first section. So the first one, we've got y equals 2x minus 5. The best way to think of it is a little bit like equations. It's the same sort of technique, it's just things are never going to simplify necessarily. So we want this to be just x equals, but at the moment we've got 2x subtract 5. So the first thing I want to do is try and get x on its own, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Okay, so by doing that, on the right hand side I'm just going to be left with 2x. Okay, because minus 5 add 5, they cancel each other out. And then on this side we've got y add 5. Now obviously you can't simplify y add 5, so you've just got to leave it as that. Okay, the next part, so we've got 2x at the moment, we just want 1x, so that means I'm going to have to divide both sides by 2. Okay, so then on the right hand side we'll be left with what we wanted, x equals. Now on this side, the easiest way is just to leave it as a fraction, so we'll still have the y plus 5 there, and then we need to divide it by 2, so we've left it as a fraction. Alternatively, you could put a bracket around it and then put a half at the front, but to be honest, that's more than enough. Okay, so for the next one, again we want to make x a subject. It's been multiplied by 3 and divided by 5. So first thing we need to do is deal with the fraction. So because it's being divided by 5, the opposite would be to multiply by 5. Okay, so we'll be left with just the numerator of the fraction, so we'll just be left with 3x. Okay, now if you're multiplying something, so multiplying a number with two different things, for now I want you to put it in brackets. Okay, and the reason why is a lot of people would just multiply the y by 5 and not the 2. Okay, whereas if we put brackets in, we know that we need to multiply both of those parts by 5. Okay, so if we expand those as well, so 5 times y is 5y, 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, again we just want x here, we don't want 3x, so we're going to have to divide both sides by 3. And again, we're going to leave the answer as a fraction just because it's easier to do. So we're going to have x is equal to 5y add 10 divided by 3. Now, at this point, you could have left it in its brackets if you wanted to. You didn't have to expand out and multiply. But sometimes it could have cancelled. So let's say that it multiplied to make, so let's say that was a 3 instead. That could have multiplied, and then you could have maybe cancelled the 3 out afterwards, but in fairness it doesn't really make a difference, it's your decision. Okay, so next slide. Okay, now for this one we do need to expand out the brackets because what we're wanting is inside of it. Okay, so we're going to multiply out, so y multiplied by x is xy or yx, I like to have them in order. And then y multiplied by 2 is 2y. And again, we just leave that as equal to 5. Okay, this is our main focus, so we don't need this 2y part. So we're going to subtract 2y from both sides. Okay, so 2y subtract 2y is 0y, so we are just going to be left with xy on the left. Okay, and the right part is just 5 subtract 2y. Okay, these can't simplify because the 5 doesn't have a y. Okay, and then we can then just divide by y on both sides. Okay, just remember that at the moment these two are being multiplied together, so the opposite of that would be divide. So we're left with x equals 5 minus 2y divided by y. Now you can leave that as the answer. You can simplify it a little bit. So we can't divide 5 by y. So that will have to stay as 5 divided by y. The subtract, obviously, because it's still subtract there, but we can simplify this. So 2y divided by y would just be 2. Okay? But if I'm honest, that's absolutely fine to leave it as that. Okay, and the last one. I'm actually gonna... No, I'll leave it as it is. So again, we're focusing on this x squared, so we don't want this -1, and we don't want the 5, and we don't want it to be squared, so there's a lot to do. So first thing, I'm going to add 1 to both sides, because then that leaves me with just 5x squared, rather than having the -1 as well, and then we'll have 4a plus 1 on the right hand side. Okay, this point, make sure you remember this. You have to divide by the number on the front first before you square root it. Okay, so lots of people want to square root it, but the problem is if you square root everything, that means you're going to have to square root 5, which isn't a nice number. Well, it's a third, so it's going to be lots of infinite decimals, so just make sure you divide by the number on the front first. So divide by 5. So then we're left with x squared is equal to 4a plus 1 divided by 5. Again, I'm leaving it as a fraction just because that's easier. Oh, it doesn't look like an equals. There we go. And then the final step is we need to square root that because we just want x, we don't want x squared. Okay, again, we're going to leave it as a fraction. All I'm going to do is add a square root sign around it. Okay, and that's the answer.